So can you take a jig right out of the package, throw a trail on it, and catch a donkey? You absolutely can. However, with a few modifications to these guys, to jigs, you might be able to increase your catch rate. These have worked for me over the years. They might be right for you. Let's start with mod number 1. All right, let's talk about color flashing your jig head. Now, if you're fishing warmer water and the bass are pretty aggressive, I like to take a red or an orange dot or a pink and black dot painted on the jig head. As you can see right here on this swim jig, there's a little eye, and I like to recreate that on a lot of my other jigs. And majority of the time, they don't come with some type of eye on it. I like to create those. So what I do is take some paint markers, one side, the other side, let that dry for a second. Can't find my red marker. I usually like red marker, nonetheless. Then I take black, make that dot. And there you have it, folks. A little color flash. I really just like to give them eyeballs because this is going to represent, as it's flickering through the water, to the bass, a bluegill. And so most bluegills have eyes, right? So I like to put those on my jigs. I feel like it helps out. All right, mod number 2, we're gonna talk about skirt trimming. A couple things about skirt trimming. Long skirts and really bulky skirts, whenever they get wet, they can bulk up and it will absolutely destroy the action of your jig. So that's why I recommend some cases trimming the skirt. Let me walk you through all different ways you can do that. First off, as you get a jig, you tie it on, throw it into water first before you throw it into that juicy spot, and just see how it works its way through the water. If you like the action, you're good to go. If it's wadding up, you're gonna wanna take this back to your shop. You're gonna wanna modify this a little bit. One of the number 1 things you're looking for in the skirt is you wanna make sure that it's not interfering with your soft plastic, right? If this skirt is going over the action of your paddle tail or the action of the flaps on your crawl, then it's simply just not going to have that action that it was created to have, and you're most likely going to come up short. So as you can see here, perfect example, the skirt goes way over the paddle tail. It's just not going to move through the water like I want it to. So in this particular case, I'm going to want to trim this up. If it's too long, what I'll try to do is create a V cut. And so what I'll do is kind of start to trim this material at a V, right? There we go. As you can see, after a while, after I work on this a bit, you're going to have it come down to a V. However, now if you have a bulky or a real bulky, let me see if I have one of these. I should. I have a ton of jigs here. A really bulky skirt. This thing, pretty crazy, right? And so what you could do, instead of trimming the length, I would go through and start trimming off pieces of material until, of course, it is less bulky. And that's another way to do it. Also, whenever you're trimming these, another great way, instead of just doing the V, is you could trim it at different lengths, right? You're not going to want to just pull all this down and cut it straight over. It's not what you're looking for. And so what I would do is just kind of go through there and start trimming off at different lengths. And then you're going to have, as you're pulsating that jig through the water, it's going to flow a whole lot better. It's going to look more natural. You're going to get more bites. Let me work on this one for a minute. I'll show you what it looks like when I'm done. All right, I'm almost done with this, but didn't want to take too much time. I want to get along with the video. But as you can see, I tapered a lot of the cuts, and the paddle tail on this big Joshy paddle crawl is a lot more free. Not going to get tangled up in all of those threads. All right, got some eyes on them. Going to be throwing this tomorrow. And being this a darker jig, I'm going to be throwing this in muddy water. It's the perfect place for it. All right, so if you've been around bass fishing for a while, you'll know that bass are more active and willing to chase in warmer weather than they are in cold weather. In cold weather, they are more lethargic, and because of this, and because jigs are great year-round for bass fishing, you'll need to adjust your jig trailer accordingly. In cold weather, I am going to like a more compact, smaller jig, but warmer weather, what you're looking at here, are a bunch of freaking meals, right? Warmer weather, you gotta go something with a lot of action, a lot of flappy arms. This is going to get those big bass to nail it because this is a really slow moving giant meal. So that's gonna be awesome. So something you can experiment with is you're not getting bites on the giant meal. If your trailer has 8 different appendages, right? There's a ton of them on there. What you can do is start changing them up. You can start ripping off the different appendages. It's going to change the action a little bit. And if you guys know about bass fishing, it's amazing what a nuanced change and how that can affect the bite. All right, let's talk about mod number 4. Let's talk about jig trailer holds. Now, this is going to be what holds your jig on after you slide it up the hook shank. And you can kind of see it right there. Now, some designs are really awesome. They're gonna hold that soft plastic on your jig head for a very long time. A lot of them absolutely suck. And you don't want this thing not in perfect position and kind of hanging off and sliding every single time you throw. Because once it gets wet, it keeps sliding off and it's super annoying that after every throw you have to adjust it. So what I do before I go out fishing, the night before, what I'll do is I take my favorite super glue. This stuff right here is the only super glue I like using with this because it's a nice applicator, kind of push it in the side. It never gums up at the end. It's just awesome. So I'll throw the link in the description below. If you haven't tried this yet, freaking sweet. And on every single one, anytime I put a soft plastic on a jig, doesn't matter how awesome the hook hold looks or not, I will put a dab of super glue right there as I put it on. And I usually never have to worry about it after that because that will stay on there forever. So if you're new to bass fishing, that's an old trick, but it might be the first time you are hearing it. This is a teaching channel after all. All right, let's move on to mod number 5. So if you find yourself losing bass on a hook set on one of your favorite jigs, it may be that your weed guard is too stiff. And if you're not throwing it at heavy cover too much, you may want to modify it. And there's a couple things you can do to it. One, you can trim it down in length, right? This one's pretty long in my opinion, right there. Or you can trim some of the fibers to make it less stiff. And so typically my rule of thumb is I like this to be as long. It's got to land somewhere right as the barb hits the shank. And that's about as long as I like it, unless I'm fishing really heavy cover and I'll leave it out there. A couple other things you can do. So I'll probably trim this one down about 1/8 of an inch. Another thing you do, this one's not super stiff. Some of these are like really stiff. And so you can start trimming out a few of these fibers and kind of snip these off. I'm not going to do it on this one because I kind of like it. Another thing to do, if you're like, hey, you're missing some hook sets, you're out there on the water, you don't have a pair of scissors. Another thing to do, the old trick is you can just fan these out a bit. Fan your weed guard. And that means it's going to take less and less pressure to get this down there to set that hook on the hook set. So you can fan out your weed guards. Another thing is if you're fishing a like rocky bottom and you have yourself a, let me see here, let's find a football head jig. Boom, if you have a football head jig and you're like, hey, I'm not really worried about getting this thing hung up at all. You can take the weed guard out completely. I know some people who will do that. You can pull it out. Some are gonna be easier than others. They're just kind of glued down in there. Or you can cut it out if you like as well. So another option for you. So another thing you do if you have a really thick weed guard, you can kind of cut a V cut. And this one's really not thick, but you can cut out some of the fibers on the middle. And so when it gets done, your weed guard looks like a V. And so it's just gonna take less pressure to push that down. If some of your main fibers down here right in the middle are gone. And so if it's V'd like this, when you push it down, it's going to kind of spread out. It's going to make that easier. And so some jigs are actually made that way. A lot of times, not a lot of them are, so you're going to have to modify them if that's what you want to do. But an easier way is really just to fan that out. All right, number 6, adding bait fuel. Now, I'm slowly coming over to the land of scents making a difference, but I don't believe the bass are sniffing my baits and determining to bite. Typically not happening, especially in the middle of summer. I believe scents are more beneficial on the side of bass holding onto your lure longer before they realize it's not a delicious bluegill. Instead, it's rubber, steel, tungsten, and lead. So I also like scents because I believe that it can cover up the unnatural scents, right? The oils and look, all this stuff sitting on my tool bench, and there's probably gasoline and other oils on here. And so this is going to help cover it up. And I like that. So I will take any extra time it takes me to register that bass is on that jig. Sometimes the bass will take it to left or right, and I won't know for a few seconds before I realize it, or the bass might take your jig straight towards you. So the longer it's keeping that piece of metal in its mouth and you're tricking it, maybe bait fuel, maybe it works. So I've been trying it out lately. Typically how you apply this is you're gonna want to marinate your soft plastic. So you take a bunch of this, put it inside your bags of your favorite jig trailers and let that sit, well, for really as long as you want, but at least overnight. I know other guys will take this, they'll inject it in there and they'll kind of take a needle and kind of inject all that. And so over time, or when you get it back after using it after 10 throws, you kind of, squeeze it and it lets more of that out. You can do that too. Personal preference here. A few tips here. If you're breaking off your jig, check the eye of your jig, right? Make sure it's smooth inside of there. If you have chip paint, if you have dirt, you have sand, this could all cause a break off. And if you're like me, you only learn those lessons on freaking donkeys. All right, guys, I want to hear from you. What is your favorite jig brand and the trailer you'd like to put on that? My favorite jig brand is Beast Coast Fishing, and my favorite jig trailer is the Green Pumpkin Missile D-Bomb from Missile Baits. I will throw the links to those in the description below. And if you're looking to catch some bass in July, I got the video for you. 3 lures that will dominate in July. Check that video out right there. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you.